Imagine the feeling of welcoming something sacred into your home, a presence so profound that it fills every corner with peace and reverence. It was this unexpected invitation that Obed-Edom received when he opened the doors of his home to the Ark of the Covenant, an emblematic symbol of the divine presence. In a simple act of faith, he and his family became guardians of this divine presence, and their lives were transformed forever. The story of Obed-Edom shows us that God does not seek perfection, but open hearts, willing to receive him regardless of the circumstances. In this message, we will walk alongside Obed-Edom and discover the lessons of courage, trust, and legacy he left us. We will explore how God's presence has brought unexpected and lasting blessings to your family and community. And as we learn from his example, we will see that this is not just an ancient story, but a living invitation to each of us. A call to open our hearts and experience the peace and transformation that only God's presence can bring. The Ark of the Covenant's journey was filled with awe, reverence, and at times, profound awe. This sacred chest, symbolizing the presence of God among his people, was not just any artifact. It carried a promise of power and protection, but only when you approached it with a pure heart. After Israel's defeat and period of Philistine captivity, the return of the Ark to Israel was marked by great celebration, but also by a harsh reminder of its holiness, with the premature death of Uzzah while trying to stabilize it. It was a moment of reflection for King David and everyone present, demonstrating that God's holiness demanded respect beyond the best intentions. With fear in his heart, David hesitated to take the ark directly to Jerusalem. He longed to have it in his city, near his palace, but the recent tragedy made him ponder the ark's next resting place. The house of Obed-Edom came to mind. The decision to leave her there may have initially seemed practical, a temporary measure, but God, in his divine plan, was about to bless this seemingly modest family in extraordinary ways. Sometimes God's blessings find us in the simplest of places, like a humble house on the outskirts of town, rather than in the grandest halls. Imagine Obed-Edom standing on his doorstep, hearing that the ark, a symbol of God's presence, was about to arrive at his home. It was an invitation that not everyone would dare accept. Some might see this as a risk, given what happened to Uzzah. But Obed-Edom was a man of faith, and perhaps in his heart, he understood the honor of welcoming the divine presence, even if it came with uncertainty. How often do we face choices that challenge our comfort? Sometimes it's about opening the door to possibilities that others might shy away from. The day the ark arrived at Obed-Edom's house must have been unforgettable as the Levites carefully placed it. A sense of reverence filled the air, perhaps mixed with a little fear. It wasn't just any visitor, it was the presence of the Lord there, in his home. What would you do if a presence like that entered your home? Would you worry or feel peace, knowing that God was with you in deep ways? As Obed-Edom's family adapted to the presence of the ark in their home, each day became a reminder of God's closeness. In their little dwelling, they saw themselves carrying the weight and blessing of something beyond human measure. His story reminds us that, like Obed-Edom, our greatest encounters with God often occur right where we are, without needing to be in a palace or temple. Just as God chose Obed-Edom's house, he chooses each of us for his purposes, and sometimes his presence arrives when we least expect it, in places we may feel are unworthy. Obed-Edom's willingness to accept the ark shows us that God's blessings come to those with open hearts and a welcoming spirit, even in times of fear. Obed-Edom was not a man of fame or riches. He was a humble Levite, a servant by lineage and vocation, living a peaceful life dedicated to God and his family. In the lineage of Israel, the Levites had a unique role, carrying the honor and responsibility of serving God in the temple and in sacred duties. Obed-Edom's life, simple as it might seem, was shaped by his faith and his connection to a greater purpose. In a world where people often seek recognition and titles, he reminds us that greatness is not always in position or power, but in the willingness to serve. When the ark was brought to his threshold, it was not because of his social position, but because of his openness and devotion. Imagine the feeling of welcoming something sacred into your home, a presence so profound that it emanates peace and reverence everywhere. It was this surprising invitation that Obed-Edom received when he opened the doors of his humble residence to the Ark of the Covenant, an emblematic symbol of the divine presence. In a simple gesture of faith, he and his family became guardians of this divine presence, and their lives were forever marked by this transformative experience. The story of Obed-Edom teaches us that God does not limit himself to choosing people of prominence or wealth. He sees beyond what human eyes can see, opting for individuals whose hearts are open and faithful. It's comforting to know that God's blessings are not restricted to those with apparent success, for he sees us through a lens of love and purpose, ready to use us as we are. Obed-Edom's decision to accept the ark into his home was a leap of faith. He knew the story of Uzzah and was aware of the risks, but he trusted in divine protection and chose to open his doors. This moment beautifully portrays how faith can ask us to overcome our fears and believe that God's presence is greater than our worries. When we are called to make bold decisions, do we allow fear to hold us back? Or do we step forward in faith, as Obed-Edom did? Although the Bible doesn't tell us much about Obed-Edom's daily life, we can imagine him as a man who lived by simple values, valuing his family, his faith, and his work. His home was probably modest, but filled with warmth and reverence for God. For someone like him, welcoming the ark meant more than housing a sacred object. It was incorporating the presence of God into your daily routine. Can you imagine opening your own home to such a huge responsibility? It's a reminder that in our own lives we are called to make room for God, even if we feel unworthy. The story of Obed-Edom teaches us that faith is not in having everything planned or in perfect circumstances. It's about saying yes to God's call, even in the face of the unknown. His willingness to welcome the ark demonstrates that an open heart can lead to unimaginable blessings. Sometimes it is in these silent, unseen acts of faith that God's glory shines most brightly, as it did in the house of Obed-Edom. As we continue Obed-Edom's journey, we will see the blessings that followed his act of faith, but his story begins with a heart simply open to God. Just like Obed-Edom, we also have opportunities to welcome God's presence and allow him to transform our lives in unexpected ways. When Obed-Edom opened his home to the ark, it was not just an act of obedience, but of courage. Welcoming the ark meant accepting the presence of God in a very tangible way. Imagine the atmosphere in your home as the ark rested there, a mix of reverence, awe, and perhaps even a little anxiety. It's not every day that someone gets the opportunity to host something so sacred and powerful. However, Obed-Edom did not allow fear to dictate his decision. He chose faith over worry, and that choice laid a foundation for the blessings to come. Obed-Edom's family certainly felt the impact of his decision. His children, his wife, everyone under his roof experienced a change in their daily lives. What was once an ordinary home had now become a sacred space. And just as their decision to welcome the ark led to blessings that extended to every aspect of their lives, it is a powerful reminder that when we embrace God wholeheartedly, his blessings are not just individual, they overflow into our families, homes, and communities. As the ark rested in Obed-Edom's house, there must have been a new rhythm, a peaceful certainty that God's presence brings. This did not mean that life would be perfect or without challenges, but rather that they could trust in divine provision, knowing that his hand was upon them. This is the beauty of a life centered on faith and courage. It brings a constant peace that the world cannot offer, a security that is rooted in unshakable trust in God's protection. Just like Obed-Edom, we face moments when our faith and courage can change the lives of those around us. Your family serves as an example that sometimes our acts of faith create ripples that touch everyone in our circle. The courage shown by Obed-Edom is something we all need in moments of uncertainty, when life presents us with the unknown. He did not know what would happen to the ark under his roof, but he trusted in God's protection and care. We too face times when we are called to open doors, both literally and figuratively, for what God has planned. What doors in your life might God be asking you to open with courage and faith? The house of Obed-Edom not only accepted the ark as a sacred object, but as a symbol of divine presence and protection. This small but profound decision to welcome the ark led to blessings that permeated every aspect of their lives. It is a powerful testimony that when we open our hearts to God, the blessings He brings know no bounds. It is not because of what we have, but because of who God is, that we are touched and transformed. If this message touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Perhaps you too have opened a door in faith and witnessed God's blessings unfold. As the Ark of the Covenant rested in Obed-Edom's house, God's blessings poured abundantly upon him and his family. This was not a small blessing or a single moment of favor. It was as if the divine presence brought an excess of kindness that touched every aspect of their lives. For 3 months, the house of Obed-Edom experienced divine favor that was evident to everyone around them. The Bible does not specify every blessing, but we know that God's blessings often manifest themselves in ways that go beyond words, bringing peace, joy, health, and provision that only His hand can provide. Imagine the people in the village seeing the changes in Obed-Edom's family. Perhaps they noticed their children growing stronger, their crops thriving, or a certain lightness in their spirits. God's blessings have a way of radiating outward, making even ordinary days feel extraordinary. And isn't it God's way to transform simple, everyday things into sources of joy and abundance? When we invite God into our homes, He often blesses us in ways we never anticipated, filling our lives with His goodness. The blessings were not limited to material gains or visible changes. The house of Obed-Edom must have felt a deep sense of peace and security. There is a quiet confidence that comes when we know God's presence is with us, a reminder that no matter the struggles, His love and protection are near. These blessings were a reflection of God's faithfulness, a sign that He delights in caring for those who receive Him. The season of blessing was the result of Obed-Edom's faith and his willingness to fully embrace God's presence. It shows us that sometimes the blessings we seek are simply waiting for an open door and a welcoming heart. In our lives too, God's favor is not confined to ancient stories. It is available to each of us today. For Obed-Edom, the blessings likely became a testimony to everyone around him, a visible sign of God's love and grace. Your neighbors and community must have realized that receiving God brings favor, not fear, and that His blessings are meant to be shared, shining like a light for others to see. When God blesses us, He often uses those blessings to inspire and encourage those around us, reminding us that we are all part of His larger story. As we progress through the story of Obed-Edom, we see that his blessings were not the end of his journey, but the beginning. Like him, we are invited to live with open hearts, ready to receive God's grace and share it with others. Sometimes God's blessings overflow not just for our joy, but as a way to bring others closer to Him, spreading His love in the most beautiful ways. While the ark rested in the house of Obed-Edom, the blessings did not just touch the home superficially. They transformed their family from within. It was as if each member felt a personal encounter with the presence of God, leaving their hearts transformed and their spirits uplifted. This transformation went beyond material blessings to the depths of his faith and character. Obed-Edom's family became a testimony to this kind of inner transformation, a living example of how God's love can reshape our lives. Each day with the ark brought a deeper sense of awe and gratitude in their hearts. Obed-Edom and his family began to see life with new eyes, recognizing God's hand even in the smallest details. Perhaps they would find more joy in each other's presence, more patience in challenges, and more gratitude in their daily routines. It's common that when we allow God into our hearts, our perspective changes, and we begin to notice His love in places we never noticed before. Do you find moments in your own life where God's presence brings you peace, even without words? This transformation in Obed-Edom's family was not just for them to keep. Others noticed, and word spread of how God could bless so wonderfully. It reminds us that in our own lives, we also have the opportunity to make room for God and allow Him to transform our existences in ways we never expected. When Obed-Edom opened his house to the ark, it was not just an act of obedience, but of courage, faith, and willingness to experience the transformation that God offers. The blessing that God showered on Obed-Edom's humble home became a beacon of hope, a reminder that divine favor can reach anyone, anywhere, as long as the heart is willing. Sometimes our own blessings inspire others, showing them what is possible when you have faith. Obed-Edom's family became a light, a symbol that God's favor is real and accessible to those who receive it. In times of uncertainty, having God's presence in their home must have brought a deep assurance, a certainty that they were cared for by Him. God not only blessed them for the moment, He prepared them for the future, strengthening their faith and strengthening their spirits. This inner transformation is the true essence of faith, growing in confidence even when the path ahead is unknown. How beautiful it is to know that God's blessings are not just temporary, but designed to equip us for a life of purpose. Obed-Edom's family learned that favor with God is not just about receiving, but about being transformed to, in turn, bless others. Their lives began to reflect God's goodness to everyone around them, demonstrating how a heart touched by God can touch the world. It's a reminder that when God blesses us, it often opens doors for us to become a blessing to others, carrying His light forward with love and faith. As we look to the future, we will see that the impact of these blessings was not limited to just Obed-Edom's family at that time, but extended through generations. Their lives were forever changed, and their faith became the foundation of a legacy that would honor God for years to come. And so we too can look at our lives and ask, how is God shaping our faith today to create blessings tomorrow? Finally, the day came when King David came to take the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. For Obed-Edom and his family, it was a moment of mixed joy and sadness. The Ark had brought profound blessings to their home, filling their lives with God's presence in ways they had never known. Now they faced the reality of letting go of something so precious. How often do we face moments when something we cherish must move on, leaving us with memories, blessings, and perhaps a touch of longing? Obed-Edom could have been saddened, perhaps even disappointed. After all, his home had been transformed by the divine presence, and blessings had overflowed in every corner of his life. But instead of clinging to the departing, Obed-Edom trusted that God's favor would remain with them even after the ark's departure. It takes mature and deep faith to let go of something good and believe that God's hand will still guide and bless us in the next season. This moment of farewell was not just about losing the ark, but about trusting God in the face of the unknown. Obed-Edom had learned that true faith does not depend on visible reminders or special circumstances. Faith is about believing that God's presence goes with us, whether we feel it tangibly or not. What a comfort to know that God's love does not go away when certain blessings move forward. His faithfulness is constant, even in change. As he watched the ark depart, Obed-Edom held on to something even greater, a deeply rooted faith in God's character, not just his gifts. They had experienced the richness of his love and the security of his care, and it would remain with them. Her story reminds us that sometimes what we need most is not the blessing itself, but the strength and faith it leaves behind, empowering us to face the future with confidence. Advancing in the story of Obed-Edom, we see that his faith did not waver. His heart remained committed to God, and he continued to serve faithfully even without the ark in his home. In our own lives, we can be inspired by his example to embrace each blessing, let go when necessary, and move forward trusting that God's goodness is never limited to a single season. When the ark left his home, Obed-Edom could have chosen to return to his former life, grateful for the blessings but moving on. However, he chose something different. He decided to follow the ark to Jerusalem and serve in the temple. This was not an obligation for him, but a heart choice, a desire to remain close to the presence of God that had transformed his life. This willingness to serve, regardless of the physical presence of the ark, shows that God's blessings had prepared him for a life of continued devotion and joyful service, but a response of love and devotion. For Obed-Edom, it was not just about the blessings the ark had brought. His heart had grown closer to God, and he desired to remain in his presence. Sometimes true faith is demonstrated not by what we receive, but by the dedication we give, even when nothing else is promised. In Jerusalem, Obed-Edom served faithfully as a temple gatekeeper and musician. Humble functions but significant for him, as they allowed him to remain close to God. Despite his many responsibilities, he embraced each one, finding joy in his service. His story reminds us that devotion is not about greatness or recognition. Rather, it is often quiet acts of faith and commitment that arise from a heart truly connected to God. How often do we also find meaning in simple acts of devotion that keep us steadfast in our faith? This commitment to God's service became a family legacy for Obed-Edom. Their children and grandchildren continued to serve faithfully in the temple, passing on the devotion that had been kindled in their hearts. Obed-Edom's choice not only impacted his own life, he planted seeds of faith that grew through the generations. We can reflect on the legacy our faith will leave, knowing that each act of love and service can inspire those who will follow us. In a world that often values status, Obed-Edom found fulfillment in simply being close to God, offering his life as an act of worship. Day after day, he chose to be present, to serve, and to worship. Their dedication teaches us that true devotion doesn't always make the headlines. Sometimes it is the quiet, consistent acts of faith that speak the loudest to God. Isn't it beautiful to think that every act of service, no matter how small, is seen and valued by him? Obed-Edom's journey of faith did not end with the blessings received at home. It continued in his daily life, in the way he served and loved God with all his heart. Her story is a reminder that devotion is not limited to special moments or blessings. It is a lifelong commitment to walk with God, serve him in joy, and remain faithful even in the ordinary routines of life. As we proceed, we will see that this faith-filled legacy became the foundation for his family's future. Obed-Edom's devotion was not just for his time. He set an example for all who came after him. May we, like him, find joy and devotion, knowing that our faith and commitment can be a light for future generations. Obed-Edom's legacy speaks to the impact of a faithful heart. He was neither a king nor a warrior, but a humble servant who deeply loved God. And this love became a lasting legacy, showing that anyone, regardless of their status, can leave a legacy of faith. In a world that often values success through external achievements, Obed-Edom's life reminds us that the greatest legacy we can leave is one of love and fidelity. How encouraging it is to know that God values our dedication even in the smallest acts of devotion. As his family continued to serve in the temple, they carried with them the memory of God's blessings and the importance of his presence. Each generation saw their roles not just as duties, but as acts of worship, an opportunity to honor the God who had been so faithful to their family. This attitude became a striking characteristic of Obed-Edom's descendants, demonstrating that a life rooted in faith can inspire generations. What values and beliefs are we instilling in our own families, and how can they impact the future? By honoring God through our daily actions, we can inspire those around us to live an authentic and dedicated faith, leaving a legacy that resonates for generations. In the legacy of Obed-Edom, we see that faith is not just for ourselves. It is a gift that can be passed on, creating a domino effect that reaches far beyond our own lives. Her story encourages us to live with an eternal perspective, knowing that every moment of devotion, every act of kindness, and every prayer can sow seeds of faith in those who come after us. As we reach the end of Obed-Edom's story, we realize that his life was a testimony to God's love and grace, a legacy that honored the one who had blessed him so richly. And so we are invited to consider the legacy we are creating, a legacy that reflects God's love and inspires others to draw closer to him. The story of Obed-Edom brings timeless lessons that span centuries to speak to our lives today. Her journey reminds us that faith is not about having all the answers or living without fear, but rather a willingness to open our hearts to the presence of God, trusting him to guide and bless us. When Obed-Edom welcomed the ark into his home, he embraced the unknown, showing us that sometimes faith demands taking a step forward even when we don't know what lies ahead. How often do we allow fear of the unknown to keep us from experiencing God's blessings? One of the most powerful lessons from Obed-Edom's life is the importance of living with an open and welcoming heart. He didn't need wealth or status to invite God's presence. He just needed a heart ready to say yes. It reminds us that we don't need to be perfect or have our lives completely organized to experience God's blessings. God looks for hearts that are willing, just as Obed-Edom's was. Are there areas in your own life where God is inviting you to open your heart, trusting that he has blessings in store? The story of Obed-Edom also teaches us about the blessings that come with faithfulness. His decision to welcome the ark led to an overflow of blessings that impacted his family and community. This shows us that when we live in alignment with God's will, his blessings often extend beyond us, touching the lives of those around us. Just as Obed-Edom's family and community witnessed God's favor, our faithfulness can be a light, inspiring and encouraging others in ways we may never fully see. In his devotion, Obed-Edom reminds us of the joy found in serving God wholeheartedly. Even after the ark left his home, he continued to serve in the temple, finding fulfillment in simply being close to God. This challenges us to seek joy not in external rewards, but in the act of devotion itself. When we serve out of love for God, rather than seeking recognition, our faith deepens and our lives enrich. Are there ways in your life in which you could embrace this joy, finding peace in the simplicity of devotion? Another lesson we learn from Edom's life is the legacy of faith he left for future generations. His children and grandchildren followed in his footsteps, serving in the temple with the same dedication. It reminds us that the choices we make today shape the spiritual heritage we pass on. Just as Obed-Edom's faith impacted his family for generations, our faith can leave a lasting legacy, planting seeds of hope and devotion in those who come after us. As we prepare to conclude his story, Obed-Edom's life stands as a beautiful example of what it means to live a God-centered life. Her story encourages us to welcome God into every part of our lives, trust him with our fears, and serve him with joy and dedication. May we, like Obed-Edom, fully open our hearts to God, knowing that his presence brings blessings beyond what we can imagine. The story of Obed-Edom invites us to reflect on how we receive God into our own lives. We may not have the Ark of the Covenant resting in our living rooms, but we have opportunities every day to invite God's presence into our hearts and homes. Just like Obed-Edom, we can create a space for God by being open, willing, and ready to receive Him. Starting the day with a simple prayer, welcoming God's presence and asking Him to guide us, is one of the most powerful ways to embrace His presence. We can find God in ordinary moments, whether through a kind word, a moment of gratitude, or a silent prayer. Sometimes it's the small acts of devotion that bring us closer to Him. How can you make room for God in the everyday moments of your life? Making room for God's presence in our lives also means trusting Him with our fears, just as Obed-Edom did in accepting the ark. We all have areas in our lives that bring uncertainty, moments when we feel out of control. But when we invite God into these spaces, we find strength and courage. The story of Obed-Edom shows us that true peace does not come from avoiding challenges, but from knowing that God is with us, guiding us. In what areas of your life do you need to trust God's care today? Living in the presence of God brings an overflow of blessings, not always in a material way, but in the peace, joy, and purpose that fill our lives. Just as Obed-Edom's family was blessed, we too experience God's goodness when we stay close to Him. These blessings often extend beyond us, touching our loved ones and our communities. When we live in faith, our lives become a testimony of God's love, inspiring others to seek it too. The story of Obed-Edom encourages us to be consistent in our devotion, not just when life is easy, but even when things are uncertain. It reminds us that God's presence is not limited to special events or religious gatherings. It is something we can experience every day as we walk with Him. We grow in faith, love, and purpose, becoming more in tune with His guidance. Are there ways you can deepen your daily connection with God, making each day a reflection of His presence? In the end, Obed-Edom's life reminds us that embracing God's presence is a lifelong journey, one that brings blessings, courage, and joy beyond measure. May we, like him, open our hearts every day, welcoming God with a spirit of gratitude and devotion. And as we do, may we find that His presence truly transforms our lives in ways we never imagined. As we come to the end of Obed-Edom's story, we are reminded of the profound impact that welcoming God can have on our lives. Through their simple act of faith, Obed-Edom and his family received countless blessings that spanned generations. His journey teaches us that God's presence transforms us from within, filling our lives with peace, courage, and joy. And just as it was for Obed-Edom, the invitation to welcome God is open to each of us today. Whether in times of certainty or uncertainty, let us take these lessons to heart, incorporating them into our own lives as we seek to embrace God's presence more fully each day. We trust in His blessings even when we can't see the whole picture, and we find peace in His unwavering love. Let's close with a prayer. Lord, thank You for the example of Obed-Edom and the reminder that Your presence is a source of true blessings. Help us to open our hearts to You, to trust You with every part of our lives, and to bring Your light to the world around us. May our lives be a testimony of Your love, and may Your blessings overflow to all who are touched by our faith. Amen. If this message has encouraged you, I invite you to share it with friends and family who may need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue on this journey of faith with us. May God's blessings always be with you.